This podcast is made possible by VersaPay.
Hi, this is Joan Hilson, CFO of Signet Jewelers, and I'm here with the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 884.
And we looked at the retirement business and said, does this make sense on a go-forward basis? What will it take for it to provide the return that we require for our policyholders? And what it would take was, frankly, further significant investment related to the right technology platform and providing the right services for customers so that we would be appropriately scaled. We decided that it was best actually for our policyholders if we sold that line of business and rather invested in our core retail protection business. And that's exactly what we did when we made the decision around selling our retirement business.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Betsy Ward, CFO of MassMutual. Before joining MassMutual as Chief Risk Officer in 2007, CFO Betsy Ward had spent 10 years in asset management. Appointed CFO of MassMutual in 2015, Ward kicked off a finance leadership tenure that's been punctuated by a string of strategic transactions, including the sale of MassMutual's retirement business to Empower in 2020, and the acquisition of Great American Life Insurance Company, and the business combination of matching Oppenheimer funds with Invesco back in 2019. As the list continues to grow, we're pleased that Ward allowed us to catch up with her and discuss the unique mix of experience and skills she credits with having shaped her finance leadership. Our episode featuring CFO Betsy Ward begins after this. When your accounts receivable automation focuses only on back office tasks, you forget the most important stakeholder, your customers. VersaPay gives you all the tools you need to automate those tasks, plus the collaboration tools to take on everything that automation alone simply can't. This doesn't just increase efficiencies and accelerate cash flow, but also creates a dramatically improved experience for your customers. And as the economy tightens, can you really afford to risk losing customers over an invoice to cash process they find frustrating? With VersaPay, clients typically achieve 50% less time managing receivables, 25% faster payments, 30% fewer past due invoices, and 81% customer portal adoption. Learn more about VersaPay's collaborative AR, ERP payments, and cash application solutions at versapay.com/CFO. Hello, we're speaking with Betsy Ward, CFO of MassMutual. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Betsy, we always begin by asking our guests to look back for us. And I just want to share with our listeners that Betsy first stepped into the CFO office in 2016. And that's 7 years ago, or nearly 7 years ago now. And she's been with MassMutual for 15 years. So nearly half of those career years were spent in the CFO office. And there was some career building in the years prior. But Betsy, if you wouldn't mind, take a look back for us and share what you believe were the experiences that helped prepare you for this role.
Great. Pleased to describe this because I believe I've taken a non-traditional path to get to the Chief Financial Officer role. In fact, didn't plan to necessarily be the Chief Financial Officer. I frankly, in college, had a number of interests, would have been pleased to go in any particular direction, It was frankly a function of what interested me, what was open, as well as frankly, did it make sense? So frankly, in college, took a lot of courses in economics, a lot of courses in Spanish, in also in statistics. Ended up with an economics and Spanish double major from University of Rochester. But with that broad liberal arts background, could have gone in a number of directions. Considered financial analysis, considered economic research work, also considered actuarial science. The best offer, and I looked a number of places in a number of countries, actually was back in Connecticut, where I was raised, in insurance as an actuarial student, because it offered me the opportunity to be educated in a management training program, so that I knew I was going to land in a management role. It included a rotational program, so that I'd be exposed to a number of different managers, and so that I'd be trained along the way. Oh, and I was paid to get that training, and I was paid extra if I passed the exams that helped me reach my own goal. So you can see, I have a number of interests, like to keep a number of doors open, and like to take advantage of them so that then they open more doors. As I was taking the exams, I realized I like this, but I'd like to parlay it into something a little different. I'd like to take this education plus what I had in college and move towards maybe finance, maybe investments. I looked around at what was available, found my next spot, said I wanted to finish getting my actuarial credential, but I'd like to go into investment management. They were looking for someone who knew the liability side of the balance sheet, who could help them manage assets better with their external clients. Perfect. I had my foot in the door with my actuarial background, and they were going to give me yet more education related to investments, and I was going to get direct client experience. Loved that. Did that for 10 years, and actually along the way, in '96, I joined a subsidiary of MassMutual in asset management. Continued in asset management until I joined MassMutual, the insurance company, the parent company, as chief risk officer. I got that role because the way one goes about managing an asset portfolio for an insurance company requires, I believe, understanding the liabilities for which you're managing the portfolio, understanding the dynamics of markets so that you're choosing the right portfolio to provide the right returns. But you also have to understand the constraints, which includes accounting, the goals, which may, depending on the company, include accounting. And that would mean statutory accounting, regulatory accounting for insurance companies, that is, GAAP accounting, net tax impact, especially frankly, if you're a property casualty company. And that all came with some of that asset management background, so that as an opportunity arose around risk management, I was asked, wouldn't you take this portfolio approach and be MassMutual's next chief risk officer, just as the great financial crisis was breaking? One might say that's a crazy time to join as chief risk officer, but I would say my background made all the difference in the world in terms of being able to have the investment experience, but also understand some of the liquidity needs so that I could apply that. So again, the doors opened partly because of what was happening in the environment, but the doors were open to me because of the diverse background.
We always like to point out that finance leaders do make career year investments at many of the companies where they grew their skills, and that the insurance company, I think you mentioned earlier, you made a 10-year investment with, and you did. You advanced into the executive ranks there as a vice president. The asset management firm you mentioned, I think another 6-year investment was made there. So not unlike many of our CFO guests, you were not an impatient career builder. You stuck to it. At the same time, it would be interesting to learn how the CFO path begins to sort of emerge in front of you, how that opportunity begins to make itself known to you. Is that something you can share with us?
Happy to. So, as I mentioned, given the actuarial background, part of becoming an actuary and getting the credential, as well as the rotations I had along the way, included working on financial reporting, financial forecasting, understanding a lot of the accounting regulations and the like. But then really applying it in my asset management portfolio, and to frankly to satisfy what my external clients were looking for, as well as then when I joined MassMutual, the asset management subsidiary of MassMutual, which is now called Barings. When I joined them to do my work as a portfolio manager, I needed to understand what my clients wanted, which included the accounting. And I actually needed to be conversant in their language, as opposed to expecting them to be conversant in mine. So the path included taking my knowledge, being able to communicate in their language. And then when I was chief risk officer, the chief financial officer asked me, hey, have you ever thought about potentially being chief financial officer? I sensed something. I didn't realize it really at the time, but he was asking me because he was thinking, as MassMutual does, about succession planning and wanting to know if that was an interest in a path I'd be interested in going on. I hadn't really thought about it, to your point, until he asked, and then thought, well, gee, he's not performing the role of chief financial officer in the traditional way of just financial reporting. It's more strategic. And gee, from that angle, it is quite interesting and allows me to bring a lot of my background to bear so that I can help manage the company from the financial perspective and provide, I think, the more holistic viewpoint that commonly is called upon currently. So I was able, MassMutual, with its succession planning, provided the opportunity, as well as I saw a bit of the example of how it could be more strategic, and frankly, believe that I've continued along that path to make it further strategic.
Just as you just related, after that discussion, you leave the room, didn't expect a door to swing open in a way. You go home and maybe consider your predecessors. Look back in time and see who's held the position. I don't know. You look at other CFOs who have, had such a position in large insurance companies and their backgrounds, and you wonder, could I be a fit? Or what, was there something more you went through? We know your answer finally came back yes. This makes sense to me as well. Can you share something of that evolution that you experienced?
Yeah, so that I am one of those planner personality types. So as I think about wanting to keep certain doors open, I think about what are the skills, the characteristics, how do I need to show up, what sort of analysis do I need to show to have that door remain open for me so that I'll be considered a top candidate for that role. So indeed, I have over the years looked at various paths I might be interested in going down, and looked at, so what do people in those positions have in terms of skills, and where are those positions going? Because of course, where they're going is where I would potentially then join. So is it leaning towards more strategic? Is it leaning towards more technology? And that very much influenced then as I looked at, I could go in the direction of chief investment officer. I could go in the direction of chief risk officer. I could go in the direction of chief financial officer, CEO. What are the skills that you need to have, and where can I have the impact working with the right team, have the right job, and working for the right company to have the impact that I think we would want to have as a team.
Well, we may have a few more career-related questions for you a little later in the episode, but right now, let's find out about MassMutual. Tell us about this company. Many of us know MassMutual. It's quite a large company, but tell us what sets it apart today.
I'd be pleased to. So MassMutual was founded in 1851. And in fact, even though the interior of the building that I'm in is quite contemporary, the outside, we've been in Springfield, Mass. Since 1851. And we're really proud of focusing on delivering long-term value. Now, I guess a number of companies may say that, but we're a mutual life insurance company, and we focus on our policyholders because, in fact, our participating policyholders are the owners of the company. There are no shareholders. So we're very aligned with our policyholders, and that does set us apart. That allows us, and in fact encourages us, to focus on the longer term, how we are not only financially strong and supporting our long-term promise to our policyholders, because most participating whole life policyholders they own their policy for decades. In fact, some even buy policies for infants, and then they'll have the policy for over 100 years. That being said, that long-term promise is unique because these days, a number of public companies are so focused on the short term that they want the stability associated with short term, and they aren't as interested in setting up the reserves for long-term promises the way a company like MassMutual does. That a third way that we separate ourselves and define ourselves is by focusing on the long term. We're focusing on the economic return that we're delivering over that period, because participating policyholders share in the upside with MassMutual. So we're looking to make sure that we're providing as competitive a dividend as makes sense over a longer period of time. And so that's rather also different. It's not just hey, how high a dividend can we pay this year, and we'll see what happens next year. We're looking for what is the appropriate amount to pay now and making sure that we're not adding volatility to our policy owners' lives, but rather providing the protection that they looked for when they turned to a financially strong company like MassMutual.
Again, we mentioned up front that it's been 7 years that you've occupied the office, and there have been a number of strategic transactions along the way. And we're hoping that you might give us sort of an abbreviated history of some of those and what's been accomplished there. It has, as the business has become part of the larger enterprise.
Yeah, it certainly has been an interesting, more than a decade being associated with MassMutual from either the asset management, risk management, or the financial side. But in the last few years, especially as I've been Chief Financial Officer, we have looked at our overall portfolio. Now, again, MassMutual is different as a mutual, and we're also different because the insurance company owns everything, which means that our policyholders own everything. So anything that's not a participating block of business, any of those other businesses or any of those other products, the profits from them go to the benefit of our policyholders. So as we looked over the last few years at our portfolio strategically, we looked at, is this other non-participating line of business providing the return and the potential future return that is optimal for our policyholders, or would we be better off selling that line of business and doing something else with the capital for the benefit of our policyholders? And that's exactly the way we look at the portfolio and looked at our retirement business a few years ago. And we looked at the retirement business and said, does this make sense on a go-forward basis? What will it take for it to provide the return that we require for our policyholders? And what it would take was, frankly, further significant investment related to the right technology platform and providing the right services for customers so that we would be appropriately scaled in that industry. We decided that it was best actually for our policyholders if we sold that line of business and rather invested in our core retail protection business. And that's exactly what we did when we made the decision around selling our retirement business. Interestingly, within a year or so, we saw the opportunity to purchase Great American Life Insurance Company, which is primarily an annuity business. That is exactly how we were looking to invest in our core business to provide additional protection products, to provide a broader, more diversified portfolio of products for our customers. And the opportunity came up while we were in lockdown during COVID. So what was particularly interesting about this is that we needed to do the diligence in a way that, of course, is safe for our employees, but as thoroughly as we, of course, need to. And we needed to make sure that we were comfortable with how the culture would work of the company we were acquiring as well as that analysis that needed to be done to make sure that this was the right fit, the right block. We did do that work all during lockdown, found that the culture has been a very good fit. And indeed, this has accelerated the broadening or diversifying of products that we wanted to offer to our current and future customers. And it's been quite successful, especially just as interest rates have done what they've done recently. And there's been quite an interest from the US public in buying annuities. So this worked very well and turned out to be just in time, even though we were taking a bit of a risk during COVID lockdown in terms of initially initiating it. It worked out very well, and so we consummated it.
Curious about the talent, the finance team talent that was involved in doing that due diligence on these different deals and all of what's involved there, whether you organize them in a certain way as you became very focused on that portfolio you described to us and how you're looking to reward policyholders. Did you come up with an approach where you were able to rotate FP&A talent or whatever the requirements might have been into these teams doing the due diligence? I'm curious, now that you've done a few of these, how have your people been deployed, or is it a feather in their cap to participate? And how do you structure that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So at MassMutual, we do look for opportunities to further develop our teams. However, it also makes sense to have those teams deployed as needed, as opposed to staffing up corporate development department like perhaps investment banking at a big bank would. Rather, what we'll do is tap various individuals, given that they have the skills and or the potential to work with someone who has the skills to work on some of these transactions. So indeed, we recognized what needed to be done, put together a plan, determined who would be tapped to be part of that. And indeed, it was part of FP&A, it's part of the tax area, it's part of the treasury area, certainly part of the actuarial team, in addition to a number of folks outside of corporate finance, to be part of the team that then is participating in due diligence. That's assessing the scenarios and the pro forma, that as well as risk scenarios and further opportunity scenarios to figure out synergies, such that we put together the thesis around what we saw as the value and determined the price we were interested in paying and what it would take to achieve that. But it very much is at the heart of it, determining what is the talent that you need and giving them that opportunity to develop themselves.
We're wondering, what are the metrics that matter for you? What is it that you're looking at, regularly? Given your risk background, we wouldn't be surprised to learn that there are a number of risk metrics that you, perhaps more than your peers, might even keep a close eye on. But can you tell us about top of mind metrics for you, and in particular non-financial metrics that have become part of the way you look at the world?
Sure. So speaking broadly about the financial side, and perhaps what's unique about the way I approach looking at my strategic finance role, I've always looked at my outcomes. There's a baseline outcome, which typically in finance you'd call the plan. But I've always considered scenarios so that I would know I'd have a trigger as to when I need to look into something to determine, do we keep that? Do I need to manage it? Do I need to sell it? Either from, for example, my asset background, or in the case of now in the finance background, is this business performing as intended? And if not, let's look at what's going on. Is this something that we need to provide some help? What is it that we need to do to get it performing the way we expect it? So I think on the financial side, probably what's a little different, and what I'm bringing from my background is this scenario analysis, as well as having a thesis around businesses, around assets, around products. For non-financial, we do have a number of different metrics that we look at relative to some productivity and this can relate to how are we looking at the productivity of distribution of products and services. And this then goes very much goes into how we look at some aspects of the scalability of our business as a whole. So back, as I had mentioned, as we were thinking about the retirement business and what it would take to make it not only perform well, but also more scalable, our metrics really came into play there. And then thirdly, when it comes to non-financial, and perhaps some of where you're going, relates to talent type metrics. And so in particular here, we do look at typical talent metrics across MassMutual. And each of us on the executive leadership team will look at metrics, typical metrics like turnover, how long you've been in your role, because there's a good side to that, how long have you been in your role, but there's also a side of, maybe it's time for us to move you and encourage you to move into a different role, because that would be good for MassMutual and good for your own development. We also look at a number of metrics around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, our DE&I metric, metrics, it's really a number of metrics, have been part of our bonus plan since 2017. And it actually has made a real difference in the way we manage diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I'm a firm believer that you manage what you measure. And indeed, by including this in the bonus plan, it's made a real difference in how we think about talent and how we're encouraging ourselves to be aware of how inclusive we are and how we're making it more diverse.
Nice. Thank you for that. We hear this expression frequently today, a data-driven organization. And just given that fact that you have 7 years now, you have likely witnessed some of the evolution in this regard. But is it yet a data-driven organization? Is it moving that direction? Are you already there? What would you tell us?
So it has become more data-driven, and we have room for further improvement. And we continue to work toward being even more data-driven. So what I'm getting at here is, when I started as Chief Financial Officer, I was eager to make a difference in how the finance department worked. I saw the opportunity for us to use our numbers more, to provide more recommendations, to provide more insights. And what in particular I noticed is that we were spending too much time on the reporting element and not enough time on the analysis. And so I wanted to know why, and to frankly change it, to reduce the amount of time that we were spending on reporting and to increase the amount of time on analysis. And so just that alone causes us to have analysis that is more data-driven. But what I also looked to do when I started as Chief Financial Officer was to start organizing our data in a different way. I wanted to have a hub of data that would be, often the phrase is used, the golden source of truth, but folks would know that it was scrubbed and had the financial controls, and it was equal to what you would find on our financial statements. So they'd know they could go there and count on that data to then to do their analysis. So even just starting with the organization and architecture of your data is critical. That's a piece where we continue to do more work. But as a result of having done that work, we have been in a better place to be able to do and be prepared for some of the accounting standard changes that have come down the pike, so that we have our data in order and can adapt and even see what the impacts are before some of our competitors. And that's made a big difference. In addition, we see this having the data and knowing which data we want to prioritize is very useful, so that then we know what important analysis we can get done to, again, further inform our management and our board.
In a lot of ways, people during the pandemic became more top of mind for finance leaders, at least the ones we've been speaking with. And we're wondering if your talent mindset in some way changed during the pandemic. And now, hopefully with it in our rear view, You have a different take on or approach when it comes to talent. Would you share with us what your talent mindset is today?
Yeah, so perhaps what you're getting at is, are we being more intentional about where we hire folks, as well as whether or not they need to be in office or not? And that certainly was accelerated as a result of what we learned going through COVID and lockdown. First, uh, does a position need to be in the office, which we call hybrid, or can it be remote? And that gets to certainly having thought about the organizational model and what does the team require? What does the work require? What does the succession planning require? So what I'm getting at there, just as an aside, is the successor to the chief financial officer needs to have had the experience and exposure and be sufficiently in the office. They can't work fully remote. That just wouldn't be effective succession planning. So that's an aspect too when you think about the organization to then figure out, can this position be remote or hybrid? The next is, if it can be remote, does that mean remote in the US, or does that mean remote thinking about anywhere in the world? And indeed, that is some of what then MassMutual has gone about and thought about. And in fact, we set up global capability centers in various spots around the world, trying to take advantage of where more of the talent that we need may exist so that it's more readily available, as well as looking at the cost nature of it. And is it less expensive to find and hire in various locations around the world? And so that certainly is another part of the equation. And then lastly, certainly having learned through COVID, is having your team in many different offices. How do you manage that? And this gets to the traditional manager often sees, I see you in your chair, and so I know you're working really hard. Well, of course, we learned during COVID, just because you can't see them in their seat doesn't mean that they're not working really hard. And we had to learn new metrics for tracking productivity, even if you can't see them in their seat.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We're going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we're just looking for a moment of insight that you've experienced along the way. It's a very broad question, but we get so many different interesting responses. We kind of like it. So permit me to ask if you have a moment of strategic insight you can share with us.
Sure, I'd be pleased to. So there are actually a couple that come to mind, one related to finance transformation, but I actually think it might be more unique given my background to talk about a strategic finance moment that related to a position I was in when I was in actually investment management, which relates to those scenarios I was talking about. So while I was working in MassMutual's investment management subsidiary, now called Barings, I was asked by our MassMutual CEO at the time, just as the very beginning of the financial crisis, if I would think about and lead whatever group I wanted to put together, a study of adverse scenarios that would help us to learn and be better prepared to manage through any of a number of different scenarios that might affect MassMutual more so than another company, so that again we'd be better prepared. And he said, don't come back in a couple weeks. I want you to really kind of dig into this, an adverse scenario analysis. I loved the project. I loved having the freedom to define the scenarios, to define who was working on it, and to be free to look at these scenarios, not just for asset management and the asset portfolio, but to look at it for MassMutual as a whole. So indeed, what I did was go out and work with the risk management department, the investment management department, the actuarial department, the finance department, and looked at what sort of risks we saw, how we would go about modeling them, and then looked at how they would affect MassMutual. But then I also needed to bring in the competitor angle too, and how we thought we would compare, such that we then what would we do next? What was the recommendation about what we needed to do next to better protect ourselves? And indeed, what I looked at were concentrations in some parts of our asset portfolio, concentrations in our insurance product and protection portfolio, as well as potential external factors and what that would do. It was great fun. I also showed what the accounting impact would be because I was working with finance. I then presented this information after 4 months of work on it with the team, presented it to senior management. And they'd said, this is exactly the kind of analysis we want to see. And as a result of that, I did more of that when I was in risk management. But I've done more of that, and I brought it more of that analysis, the data-driven analysis we were talking about, to finance. Because while in risk, you're very much focusing on these tail risks, in corporate finance, I believe it's very important to look at where do you think the company is going around the baseline scenario. So don't look for the crazy tail risks. Focus on what are the different things that can happen now. And as a result of doing that scenario analysis and showing how I like to do it, as well as how I thought it should and could be done, we do that regularly and have done it. For example, in the COVID crisis, what might happen if this is a pandemic like 1918? What happens? What else might it cause? We did some of that scenario analysis at the beginning of COVID, and I would argue that we were better prepared because of some of the work I had done in my past, bringing that finance moment into now.
Hello, and welcome to 60-Second Stories from CFO Thought Leader. The Goldman Sachs anti-raid team was between conference calls with its embattled company client when it received word that a key member of the company's management team had unexpectedly died. Looking back, Tom Fenimore says the next few months of his early career years at Goldman Sachs then became a transition point, or a period of accelerated learning. The client company, the target of a recent raid, asked Fenimore to join its team for the next few months and help the company complete a transaction that would fend off future raiders. You'll hear that story and much more on episode number 868, featuring Tom Fenimore, CFO of Luminar Technologies. Please join us and listen.
We're going to jump to our mentoring round, where we're going to ask you to look back once more. And we're going to step back to that first 30 or 60 days you became CFO. And we wonder if you could go back in time, what you would tell yourself. What is it that you wish you knew that first 30 or 60 days?
So, yeah, in the first 30 or 60 days, I felt at that time what was most important was to listen and assess a bit about where finance was. And that's pretty typical. You hear about these walking or listening tours that new managers do. At the same time, I would encourage myself in that early period to not hold back in terms of probing, hey, would this be a helpful change? Because actually during that honeymoon period, you do have more permission to ask either, one could say dumb questions, but also ask probing questions without it coming across as she's looking to change what we do for the wrong reasons. And so I actually would listen, but I would engage more with why are you doing it this way? And understanding more, and even asking, have you thought about doing it this other way? That really is a special period during the 30 to 60 days that I think one could take advantage of in a more productive way than just listening.
Nice. We haven't heard that before. That's very interesting. It affords you this unique opportunity. Thank you for that. We also like our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering, Betsy, if there's something you're known for, either a habit or part of a daily routine. It might be something a family member might point out and say, she's always done it that way. That's just Betsy. That's how she does it. I don't know, but is there something you can help us understand, something that would sets you apart in some way?
Yeah, happy to share. So I've always had an interest and love of music. I've played an instrument since I was in third grade, and I still am will do pickup groups with my flute, and I still sing with choirs, including the Boston Back Bay Chorale. And I actually really enjoy not only that there's the camaraderie and team aspect of it, but I love the performance. I really enjoy performing in a quartet with my flute or singing. That comfort with performing actually does work very well in my corporate finance role. No, I'm not singing with the board of directors. Rather, it's with the communication. I once was asked, as I was going to first give a presentation to MassMutual's board of directors, are you nervous? Are you comfortable with having to present like that? And I smiled and said, I love it. And I do. Now, it means just like in singing or playing the flute, you need to have practiced, you need to be prepared, you need to know your stuff. But the actual sharing of information and making recommendations and engaging with, in the case of music, the audience, or engaging with the board in terms of a discussion, I love that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We always like to ask for if you have a book recommendation for us. It doesn't have to be a business book. It might be something you escape with. Anything come to mind?
So not so much a book per se, but I do believe it's critical for those who aspire for a particular role, as well as, frankly, someone like me in my current role. You need to be a continuous learner. And that intellectual curiosity is critical in whatever role you're in, because the world keeps changing and the world around me keeps changing. I need to be up on the various AI bots that are popular in the press currently. How might that apply to us at MassMutual? How might it apply? Should it apply to us within our corporate finance area? I think it's really important that you understand what's going on in adjacent sectors to, for example, life insurance, what's going on in banking, what's going on in asset management, so that you're aware of these adjacent sectors and how they might creep into your sector, or how you might want to lean and have partnerships with them. And then, of course, there also are the adjacencies around technology. And particularly for us, we saw InsurTech, moving towards life insurance. And I think it's important to understand what can that do. And you need to be a constant learner that way, as well as what are your competitors doing? And why are you different? Not only so you know your comparative advantage, but are they doing what they're doing? And are we missing something? And that constant learning and reading and listening on podcasts is just critical.
I have one, we're up to the final question, but something you just mentioned, I feel compelled to ask a follow-up just regarding bots and AI. And I'm wondering, since the start of this year, turn back the clock, 2023, would we be wrong to assume that AI has become a bigger part of the conversation almost throughout the company and at every level of the company? Am I understating that, overstating it?
No, I do believe that there is a very important place for AI. And in fact, we've already started working in facilitating underwriting of life insurance policies with various with data science techniques. We use AI to help with facilitating how our customers want to interact with us with some of those chat bots that you often hear about. There is a real place for it. At the same time, it's critical, not only because of the regulations, but also because we care about protecting private information. We want to make sure that the AI doesn't misuse personal information. But with that control in place, I see that there's a bright future for AI to facilitate what we do. There will always be a human element. I'm not worried about that. But I think AI will make our lives easier and help make us make better decisions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And we are up to the final question, which is to have you look forward for us 12 months. And we're wondering what your priorities are as CFO of MassMutual. What would your priorities be over that 12?
Yeah. So at MassMutual, we have quite an aggressive financial plan as well as a business plan. And so within corporate finance, we're involved in all of that. And so, quite frankly, one is making sure some of these initiatives that we have planned or transformative initiatives stay on track. But also, quite frankly, this is such a full and important building year that I want to make sure that we remain prioritized on achieving those items timely, and that that my team is quickly escalating any concerns they have so we can nip them in the bud so that we achieve all of what we have planned this year. So in particular, we have some systems transformation. We're upgrading our general ledger within corporate finance. We're connecting to other databases across MassMutual. This may sound like the guts, but quite frankly, a strong, flexible, scalable foundation is critical, and that's part of the work that we're doing this year. So that's a real focus for us within corporate finance. Within MassMutual, we also continue to work to improve our digital interactions and transactions with customers. So this is entirely consistent with having the right, frankly, foundation will facilitate what we can do for our customers longer term.
Betsy Ward, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.